I did not go to the boundary stream expecting to feel anything. I went because 6 of my wolves were unaccounted for at the morning count, and by the 3rd week of it, even Corvan, my steadiest rider, a man who had never once brought me uncertain news, stood at my study door with his eyes slightly off-center. "They come back, my king," he said. "Every one of them, healed." Healed was the word that made me put down my quill. My wolves did not simply heal. 2 of the 6 had come back from wounds I had written off as fatal. Nass, the gray bitch who had taken an arrow through the shoulder on the eastern border, and old Fenwick, who had torn his foreleg in a river crossing and spent 2 weeks refusing to eat. I had mourned Fenwick quietly, in the private way a man mourns an animal he has known since boyhood, and then he came back, walking, the torn leg knit, the fur over the wound already growing in silver white. My healer Aldous had looked at the leg for a long time and then looked at me. He did not say anything. Neither did I. Someone was in the boundary wood. Someone was finding my wolves and treating them. That was the only explanation, and I turned it over in my mind for a week before I admitted to myself that I did not like what it implied. Luring pack animals away from their king was old pack law mischief, the kind a rival alpha might employ to thin a kingdom's strength before he moved against it. And Ashenvale had 3 rivals I did not trust. So I went myself. Corvan offered to take riders ahead. I told him to bring 4 men quietly and to follow my lead. We left before dawn on a morning in late frost season, when the river mist still sat chest-high in the pines, and the boundary stream was nothing but sound ahead of us, a cold, quick rushing in the dark. I did not take the road. I took the deer path that ran close to the water, where the mud would show me prints, and I watched the ground as we rode. The prints were there. Wolf prints coming and going from deep in my territory toward the stream's far bank, where the old millkeeper's cottage sat half-hidden by willows. No one had lived in that cottage in 4 years. The millkeeper, Torin, had died in the 2nd winter of my reign, and his land reverted to the crown. I had not thought of it since. It was a piece of riverbank at the edge of everything, not worth garrisoning, not worth taxing. Borderland, the packmen called it. Borderland refuse, they sometimes said, of the people who drifted to such places, the unclaimed, the unhoused, the wolves without a pack. There was a light in the cottage window. I held up a hand and my rider stopped. The light was warm and low, not a fire burned high but a lamp set on a sill, the kind you leave burning when you do not want to stumble in the dark. Around the cottage door in the frost-soft mud there were wolf prints everywhere. Coming, going, layered, fresh. 6 different gates at least. I knew my wolves prints the way a shepherd knows his sheep. Corvan leaned close. "My king." "They are in there." I dismounted. I told the men to wait at the tree line and I walked to the door alone. This was instinct, something I would not have been able to explain to Corvan, who was already tensing behind me. I simply knew that whatever was happening in that cottage was not happening loudly, and that if I arrived at it loudly I would learn nothing true. The door was not latched. I pushed it open without knocking. The smell hit me first. River water, dried herbs, wood smoke, and something else underneath, something I had no name for, something that went through me like a note struck on a string I had forgotten I owned. I stood in the doorway and I breathed it in without meaning to, and for a moment I forgot what I had come for. The cottage was small. A single room, stone-floored, with a low fire and a worktable covered in linen strips and clay pots and things drying from the ceiling beams. 2 wolves lay near the hearth, both of them asleep, Nass on her side, and a younger male I recognized as Bryn, who had gone missing 4 days ago with a gash along his ribs. Bryn's flank rose and fell slowly, evenly. The gash was bandaged. He was asleep the way animals only sleep when they feel completely safe, heavy and sprawled, without a single muscle braced. And at the work table, with her back to me, stood a woman. She was not what I expected. I am not certain what I expected, something furtive, something calculating, some sign of the schemer I had been preparing to confront for a week. What I found was a woman in a plain gray dress, her dark hair loosely braided down her back, working in the lamplight with the particular focused quiet of someone who does not know they are being watched. She was grinding something in a small stone bowl. Her shoulders were relaxed. She was humming, very softly, a thing so low I almost could not hear it. Not a song, exactly, more the sound a person makes when they are content. She turned before I spoke. I did not startle her. She looked at me the way you look at a neighbor's horse that has come into your yard, curious, unhurried, mildly interested. "You are earlier than I expected," she said. I stared at her. "You expected me?" "I expected someone." She set down the stone bowl. Her eyes were steady and gray-green, the color of the stream outside in winter. "The wolves belong to a king, I know. I have seen the ring marks on their collars. I knew eventually someone would come to see where they were going." She was not afraid. This was the second thing that struck me after the smell of the cottage, the utter absence of fear. My riders' wives grew nervous when I passed through their yards. My own counsel watched me with careful eyes. This woman looked at me the way she had looked at the stone bowl, with calm, attentive interest. "You have been treating them," I said. "Yes." She moved to the hearth and crouched beside Nas without asking my permission or glancing at me for it. She checked the bandaging on the gray wolf's shoulder, pressing lightly, and Nas's ear flicked, but she did not wake. "The gray one came to me first 3 weeks ago. A wound, already infected. I do not know how she found me. She simply appeared at my door one night and lay down on the step." "She found you," I repeated. "Wolves are not stupid." She looked up at me with something that might have been very faint humor. She needed help. She came where there was someone who might give it. I looked around the cottage again. The herbs on the ceiling I recognized now: woundwort, yarrow, shepherd's purse, river clay in the pots for drawing swelling, linen strips cut precisely, soaked in something. She knew what she was doing. The thought moved through me strangely. Not suspicion now, but something else, something I did not immediately have a word for. "Who are you?" I said. "Myra." She said it simply, without a house name after it, and she did not apologize for the absence. "I tend the boundary stream. I clear the debris in autumn before the freeze, and I watch for flooding in the thaw. Torin taught me before he died. No one appointed me to it. I simply continued." "Torin's apprentice," I said. "His neighbor. I came here 7 years ago and he let me stay." She stood, brushing her hands on her dress. "I can leave if you wish it. The cottage belongs to you, I know. I have always known I was here on borrowed time." She said it without self-pity and without calculation. It was the plainest statement of fact I had heard in years, spoken by someone who had clearly made her peace with it a long time ago. There was no appeal in it, no performance of suffering designed to soften me. She was telling me the situation as it was, and she was prepared for any answer I gave. I did not give her any answer at all. I found that I could not. My bond had never ignited. I had been king of Ashenvale for 11 years, and in that time I had taken the counsel of every healer and elder and packwise man in 3 territories, and they had all told me the same thing in different language. Some bonds simply do not. Some alphas rule without a mate. The pack does not require it. The kingdom does not require it. I had believed them by the 6th year, and by the 9th year I had stopped thinking about it at all. And now I was standing in a mill-keeper's cottage at the edge of my land at the wrong end of a frost-season morning, and something in my chest was pulling in a direction I did not recognize. I should leave, I thought, tell her she may stay, commend the care she has given my wolves, ride home. I pulled a stool from under the work table and sat down. She looked at me for a moment, and then she simply went back to the stone bowl. Whatever she had been grinding, she continued. I watched her work. The 2 wolves breathed slowly by the fire. Outside, I heard Corvin shift his weight in the frost, and I heard him say nothing, which told me he was too well trained to question this. After a time, Myra said, "The gash on Bryn is deeper than it looks. He will need another 3 days before he can travel hard. I can send him back in 2 if you need him sooner, but the stitching will pull." 3 days, I said. She nodded. She mixed something into the bowl and tipped it into a pot on the low fire. "How many have come to you?" I asked. "Altogether, 11, since the gray one in early frost." She did not look at me. "They come when they are hurt. I have not gone looking for them." 11. More than a third of my pack's wolves had made their way to this woman's door in 2 months, and she had tended every one of them and sent them home without claiming anything for it, without telling anyone, without coming to the hall to present herself and request payment or standing or any of the things a person in her position, unclaimed, borderland, at the mercy of whatever king thought to notice her, might reasonably have sought. "You asked for nothing," I said. "It came out more bluntly than I intended." She looked at me then. "What should I have asked for?" I did not have an answer. She turned back to the pot. I stayed for an hour. I know this because the frost outside was still heavy when I arrived, and it was beginning to thin when I left, and the frost thins in this country in the hour before the sun clears the ridge. I told myself I was staying to assess the condition of the wolves. Bryn stirred once and Myra went to him, murmuring something, her hand resting on his head, and he settled again without opening his eyes. Nass shifted in her sleep and knocked a clay pot off the hearthstone, and Myra caught it without looking, the way you catch a thing you have caught 100 times before. She made tea at some point and set a cup near me without asking whether I wanted it. I drank it. It tasted like the stream smelled, cold and clean with something green underneath. When I stood to leave, she stood too. She looked at me in that steady, unhurried way, waiting. "You may stay," I said. "The cottage is yours to use." Something moved in her expression, not relief exactly, but a quiet settling, like a branch that has been held tense against the wind and is allowed at last to be still. "Thank you," she said. I walked to the door. I stopped with my hand on the frame, and I did not know why I stopped. The pull in my chest was not going to let me leave cleanly, and I knew it, and I did not understand it, and I was a man who did not tolerate things he did not understand. I turned back. "Are you well here? Do you need anything?" She looked slightly surprised. It was the first time I had seen anything like surprise on her face. "I am well," she said. "I have the stream and the wood, and the wolves seem to prefer my company. I want for very little." I left. I rode back to Ashenvale's great hall with Corvin beside me and 4 riders behind me, and nobody said anything for a long time. Then Corvin carefully said, "She seems harmless, my king." "Yes," I said. "Should I post a man on the road, to watch?" I thought about this. "No," I said. Corvin did not ask why. He was a wise man. I went back in 4 days. I told myself it was to collect Bryn, who should be healed enough to travel. I told myself I had questions about the other wolves. Aldous still wanted to understand what she had used on Fenwick's leg, because whatever it was had worked better than anything in my healer's kit. I did not tell myself the truth, which was that the smell of river water and herbs and that unnameable other thing had not left me in 4 days, and that at least 3 times I had found myself stopped at a task mid-sentence in a letter, mid-step in the corridor, with no memory of stopping. She was at the stream when I arrived this time, alone, wading in the shallow flat where the water spread before the mill race. She was clearing debris from the winter, branches, clumped weeds, anything that would block the flow in the thaw. The water was not warm. She did not seem to notice. She worked with the same quiet efficiency she brought to everything, and I stood at the bank and watched her for a moment before she heard me. When she looked up, she did not seem surprised. "Bryn is inside," she said. "He can go home today." "I know," I said. "I came to see how you are." She went still for a moment, standing in the stream with the cold water around her knees and a tangle of dead branches in her arms. Then she came to the bank and set the branches aside. "I am well," she said. She studied me with that gray-green gaze that did not flinch. "Are you well, my king?" No one had asked me that in 11 years. Not in those words, not in that tone, genuine inquiry, no agenda in it, no fear of the answer. The council asked how I was in the mornings as a form of greeting, meaning nothing. Corvin asked when he was concerned about a decision I was about to make. No one asked simply because they wanted to know. "I am not certain," I said. She nodded slowly, as if this were a reasonable answer to give the King of Ashenvale about his own health, and she sat down on the bank and looked at the stream. After a moment, I sat beside her. We watched the water for a while. This should have been strange. It was not strange. It felt like the most natural thing I had done in longer than I could remember, sitting beside this woman I did not know in the cold of the frost thaw, listening to the stream run. "Torin used to do this," she said eventually. "Sit by the water, he said it sorted things." She picked up a small flat stone and held it. "He was right, usually." "What sorts of things did you have to sort?" She was quiet for a moment. "When I first came here, I was not in a good place. I had come from a situation that had not been kind. I was unclaimed and I had no house name, and I had made some decisions out of desperation that I was not proud of." She set the stone down. "The water helped, and Torin helped, and eventually things seemed clearer." I did not ask her what the unkind situation had been. It was not my right. But I sat with the fact of it, this woman who had come to the edge of everything and made a life out of it, not because she had no other choice, but because she had found, here at the boundary stream, something that felt like hers. "You are the most self-possessed person I have met in a long time," I said. She looked at me sideways. "That is a strange thing to say." "It is an accurate thing to say." She almost smiled. It was not quite a smile yet, it was the shadow of one, the shape of it before it happened. "I have had time," she said, "and space, and the wolves who do not ask you to perform anything for them." The wolves. I thought of Nas, sprawled by the fire. I thought of Fenwick coming home with his leg knit silver white. "Why do they come to you?" I asked. Not the practical question. I understood now that she had the skill and the medicines. I meant the other thing. The way Nas had arrived at her door without being called, the way Bryn had lain down in her back room and trusted her with a wound that would have felled a man. Wolves did not do that. My wolves certainly did not do that. They were pack animals, bonded to me and to Ashenvale, and they did not simply transfer that trust to a stranger at the stream's edge. She thought about it. "I do not know," she said finally. "They started coming and I let them. I did not try to make them. Maybe that is part of it. I never reached for them." I looked at her. She was looking at the stream, not at me, and there was something in her face in that moment, something open, unguarded, the face of someone who does not know they are being watched, that went through me like the cold water of the stream itself. Clean and sharp and entirely real. My bond, which had been silent for 38 years, made a sound in my chest like a key turning. I did not show it. I had spent a long career not showing things. I sat by the stream with Myra until she stood and said she should check on the pot she'd left on the fire, and I followed her back to the cottage, and I collected Bryn, who accepted the lead rope with more cooperation than he had shown me in months, and kept looking back toward the cottage as we left. Myra stood in the doorway and watched us go. I did not look back, but I felt it when she went inside, the way you feel the moment a lamp is taken from a room. On the road back to the hall, Corvin said nothing for a long time. Then, "You went again, my king." "I went to collect Bryn." "Yes," said Corvin. Bryn, on the lead, turned his gray head and looked at me. "I chose not to have this conversation. I want Aldous to look at the leg," I said. "And I want the boundary stream maintained properly. Send a supply cart to the cottage at the end of the month. Timber, oil, whatever she uses, check with her on what she needs." Corvin was quiet for a beat. "Shall I tell her it is from the pack stores?" "Tell her it is from the Crown." I looked ahead at the road. She is doing the crown's work. Yes, my king. I went back a week later, then 3 days after that. I stopped looking for reasons. I am not a man who understands subtlety in himself. I have always understood it clearly enough in others, but my own inner workings have the same quality as a mill mechanism. Functional, uncomplicated, not given to sentiment. And so when I found myself on the boundary road in the early morning again, I took a moment to be honest with myself in the plain way the stream apparently inspired, and I admitted that I was coming because I wished to be here, and because nothing else in my day held the same quality of I searched for the word arrival, the sensation that something was correct. Myra never made it complicated. She did not attempt to use my visits for anything. She did not angle toward standing at court or toward a name or toward any of the advantages that a woman in her position might reasonably have begun to seek, given that her king was appearing on her doorstep with some regularity. She made tea. She showed me what she was working on. She asked me questions about Ashenvale, about the river management, about the eastern border trouble I had mentioned once in passing, and she listened to the answers with the full attention of someone who actually wanted to know, not someone gathering information to be deployed later. She told me about the stream. She knew it the way I knew my territory from horseback, intimately, in detail, with a particular fondness. She knew where the water ran deep and where it spread shallow. She knew which willows were old enough to be let alone and which new growth needed cutting back so the banks didn't narrow. She had been tending this half-mile of boundary water for 7 years, and she spoke of it with a quiet pride that she didn't seem to know was pride. "It is beautiful work," I said once, and she looked at me with genuine surprise, as if no one had said that to her before. "It is small work," she said. "Important work is often small." I meant the stream. I also meant something else, and I think she heard both meanings because she went quiet for a moment and then she went back to what she was doing. My wolves knew before I did. They always do. By my 4th visit, there were always 2 or 3 of them in or around the cottage, not wounded ones now, but healthy animals who had simply taken to appearing at the door in the evenings. Myra fed them scraps which I should have disapproved of, and they sprawled across her floor like they owned it, and she stepped over them without comment. When I arrived, they would look up at me with the familiar intelligence in their yellow eyes, and then look back at her. And there was a quality to those looks that I recognized, the quality of an animal that has decided where it belongs. My bond knew. My bond had known since the first morning by the stream, since that sound like a key turning. I was simply taking the time to be certain before I moved, which is the way I do everything. A king who acts impulsively does not remain a king. What I was certain of by the end of the month. That Myra was the first person I had been entirely honest with in years. That the pull in my chest when I was in the cottage was not curiosity and not some passing fascination with an unusual woman, but the deep and specific pull of a bond the pack elders had told me might never ignite. That I had been wrong to believe them, and they had been wrong to say it, and the bond had simply been waiting, the way the stream waits under the ice in winter, present and running beneath the cold, biting. And that I did not know how to say any of this to a woman who had spent 7 years being careful not to claim anything that was not hers to claim. What I did not expect was to have the matter decided for me. It was the last week of frost season, the morning the temperature turned. The ice on the stream had been thinning for days, and the night before it had finally broken, and the sound of it running free had come through the dark like a voice. I had not slept well. I rose before dawn, and I did something I had not done since I was young. I saddled my own horse, and I went to the boundary road alone. No Corvan, no riders, just the road and the dark and the sound of the stream and the smell of the thaw coming. I had nearly reached the willows when I heard it. A sound I had heard twice in my reign and hoped never to hear again, a wolf in real distress. Not a howl wolves howl for company, for the joy of it, for the hunt. This was the other sound, the rough, urgent, repeated cry of an animal that has gone past its own endurance. It was coming from inside the cottage. I pushed my horse to a canter. I came around the willow screen and the cottage door was open, light pouring out into the still dark morning, and Myra was kneeling in the yard in her nightclothes with a wolf's great gray head in her lap. A wolf I had been looking for a week. Aldrich. Aldrich was my oldest wolf. He had belonged to my father before me, bonded to the Ashenvale line since before I was born, and he was, I will not be embarrassed to say it, irreplaceable to me. He had been missing for 7 days, and I had sent 3 riders and my 2 best trackers to find him, and they had found nothing. No blood trail, no prints leading to any conclusion. He had simply vanished the way old things sometimes do, the way they walk away from the world on their own terms, and I had been bracing myself for the fact of it. He was here. He was in Myra's yard, head in her lap, and he was alive, and he was in a state I had never seen him in before. His great body was still, his breathing was labored, and he was looking up at her face with an expression that was not pain. Or it was pain, but it was pain born because the thing bearing it did not want to leave yet. I got off my horse. Myra looked up at me. Her face was entirely quiet. "He came last night," she said. "An hour before dawn. He was very cold. I brought him inside, but he wanted to be out here in the air." I came to them and knelt in the frost grass beside her. Aldrich's yellow eyes moved to me, and I put my hand on his head, on the broad flat of his skull, the way I had done since I was a child. And he exhaled, a long, slow exhaling, the kind that empties the body, and he rested more heavily in her lap. "He came to you," I said. "Yes." Her voice was steady. She was keeping it steady for him, I realized, not for me. Her hand was moving slowly over the gray fur of his neck, the way you stroke something you are tending to the end of, and there was a grief in her face that was not for herself. It was entirely for him, for this animal she had known for a month, 2 months. She grieved him the way you grieve something you have loved a long time. We stayed there with him in the dark while the sky went from black to the deep blue before dawn, and then to gray, and then to the first pale gold of the thaw morning. Aldrich breathed. He breathed more slowly as the light came up. He never lifted his head from her lap, but once he turned it slightly, pressing his nose against her knee, and she made a sound that was very small and very private and put her hand over his eyes. He went out with the full dawn, still and peaceful and entirely ready. For a long time neither of us spoke. I kept my hand on him. The stream ran free in the background, the ice-break sound of it, and the birds were starting in the willows. Then Myra said quietly, "I am sorry. I know he was old. I know he was not in pain, but I am sorry." I looked at her. She was looking at Aldrich, her hand still on him, her face carrying the sorrow as honestly as she carried everything else. Not hidden, not performed, simply there. "He chose a good place," I said. She did not say anything. After a moment she looked up at me, and her eyes were bright, though she was not crying, and something in her expression asked a question she would not ask aloud. "He came here," I said. "He could have gone anywhere. He came to you." She was very still. "My wolves come here when they are hurt," I said. "They come here to heal, and they come here at the end. That is not nothing, Myra. That is not something that happens by accident." I took a breath. The pull in my chest was a steady pressure now, not the shock of the first morning, but the settled certainty of something decided. "They come here because this is where they feel safe, because you make them feel safe, because something in you—" I stopped. I started again. "Because you are not nothing. The stream, the work, the way you hold yourself in the world, none of it is nothing. Do you understand what I am trying to say?" "I think so," she said softly, "though I am not certain you are saying it very clearly, my king." I almost laughed. It came up out of nowhere, the sudden, helpless almost laughter of a man who has spent 11 years being very clear, and has met someone who looks at him with calm gray-green eyes and tells him so. "I am saying," I said, "that I want you to come to Ashenvale, not as a guest, Not as a ward of the crown. I am asking you to come as the word was not one I had said aloud in 11 years. As my mate. The silence was very complete. She looked at me for a long time. The dawn light was full now, gold on the frost, gold on the stream, gold on Aldrich's still gray fur. She looked at me the way she looked at everything, steadily, without flinching, giving it her full attention. "Why?" she said at last. "Because my bond has found you." I said it simply because there was no simpler way to say it. Because every wolf in my pack has already decided. Because I have been riding to this stream every few days for a month and I have not been able to stop, and I do not want to stop. Because I looked down at Aldrich, at her hand still resting on him. Because he came here. He could have gone to the pack yard where he was born. He came to you. And I think he knew something I have been slower to understand. She was quiet for a long time. The stream ran. A willow bird called once and was answered further off. "I have nothing to bring you," she said at last. "No house name, no standing, no pack. I am borderland. My bond does not care about that. Your council will." "My council," I said, "does not choose my mate. I do." Another silence. Then she said very quietly, "Are you certain?" "I have been certain for 3 weeks," I said. "I am simply not quick with words." She looked at me. The almost smile was back, the shadow of it, the shape before it happened. And then slowly, it became the real thing. Unhurried, warm, the smile of someone who has been careful not to want things for a long time and is now, very carefully, beginning to let herself want this one. "All right," she said. Just those 2 words. No proclamation, no ceremony. All right, as if she were agreeing to come inside out of the cold. I reached across Aldrich and I took her hand. There in the frost grass at the boundary of my kingdom, with the thaw stream running and the dawn fully arrived, and something in my chest, the thing that had been pulling for a month, the key that had turned in the silence by the stream, came fully to rest. I did not bring her to Ashenvale quietly. I am a king. I understand the importance of what is witnessed. And I had reasons, specific, deliberate reasons, for wanting this witnessed. There are men in my court who would look at a woman with no house name and no pack standing and see a weakness. There are women in the great hall who would look at a river warden from the borderland and find it impossible to understand what the Alpha King could possibly want with her. I know my people. I know their prejudices, because some of them are the same prejudices I was raised with. The ones that tell you a person's worth is legible in their bloodline and their house name and the number of riders at their back. I wanted those people in the yard when I rode in. I sent Corvin ahead. I told him only that I was bringing someone back from the boundary road and that he should have the riders and the hall staff assembled in the front yard. He did not ask questions. He was learning not to. We came in at mid-morning when the light was good. Myra had gone back inside to dress, and I had waited, and when she came out she was in the same plain gray dress she always wore. She had not changed it for anything finer, because she did not have anything finer. This struck me with a force I had not expected. She came out with her dark hair braided back and her gray-green eyes calm, and she was exactly herself, undressed up, unperformed. And she climbed onto the spare horse I had brought and we rode the boundary road to the hall. The yard was full when we came through the gate. Corvin had done his job well. Riders, stable hands, the hall women, 3 members of my inner council who had apparently been in the hall when the word went through. I saw their faces as I came in, Corvin's careful neutrality, the council members' quick assessment, the hall women's open curiosity, the riders who had ridden with me to the boundary cottage and who understood more than the others. I dismounted. I went around and I held Myra's horse steady while she dismounted, and I kept my hand at her back as I turned to face the yard. "This is Myra," I said. My voice carries well in the yard. This was not an announcement made to be heard only by the front row. She has tended the boundary stream for 7 years, and she has tended 11 of my wolves over the past 2 months, bringing back animals your healers had given up on. She has done this without payment, without appointment, and without asking for anything in return. I let that sit for a moment. She is my fated mate, and she will live at Ashenvale as my Luna. I would like you to treat her as such." The yard was silent. Councilman Breck, a man who had been at court since my father's time and who I trusted to say the difficult thing, which is why I kept him on even when he irritated me, said, "My king, her house name." "She has none," I said. "She will take mine." Breck was quiet. He was looking at Myra, not at me, the way he looked at things he was trying to assess. Myra looked back at him with her gray-green eyes, steady and unhurried, the way she looked at everything. Then from the far side of the yard came a sound, the particular soft rushing of large paws on cold stone. Nas came through the stable gate at an easy trot, tail carrying the flag of a well-wolf, and went directly to Myra. She pressed her head against Myra's hip, very deliberately, the way a dog leans into someone it has already decided belongs to it. And a moment later, Bryn appeared behind her, and the young male that I hadn't yet introduced to Myra but who had clearly heard something the way wolves do, and then one of the younger females, and they gathered around her in the yard with the unself-conscious certainty of animals who are simply going where they belong. Breck watched this for a long moment. "Well," he said. He did not say anything else, but his voice had changed and the yard had changed with it. "A wolf pack tells you what it has decided. My wolves had decided this weeks ago, and they were now, in their patient animal way, making their decision known to everyone else in the yard. I had not arranged this. I had not needed to." Myra's hand was in the gray fur of Nas's neck, and she was looking out at the gathered faces with an expression that was not quite afraid, because she was not given to fear, but something more honest than that, uncertain, unsure what to do with being claimed, having spent so long being unclaimable. I stepped closer to her, not a performance now, just close so she would know where I was. She glanced at me, and I saw the question there. "All right," I said very low. She almost smiled again, almost, and then the real thing. "All right," she said. Breck came to me in my study that afternoon. I expected an argument about precedent. He sat down, which is how I knew it was serious, because Breck stands when he argues, and he was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "She has no house name." "No. No standing, no pack connection, no allies." "No," I said. "The Eastern Lords will say you have weakened yourself." "The Eastern Lords say a great many things." I set down my quill. "What do you say, Breck?" He was quiet for another moment. "I say," he said finally, "that Aldrich was the most pack-loyal wolf this hall has known in 40 years, and he walked away from a warm yard and 7 days of countryside to die in that woman's arms. And I say that in 11 years I have never seen your bond move for anyone." He stood. "And I say that if the Eastern Lords wish to argue with that, they are welcome to come and do it in person." He nodded once formally and left. I sat in my study for a while after he left. The afternoon light came through the window at the angle it does in late frost season, low and gold, and I thought about Aldrich walking away from the packyard to find his own ending at a stranger's hearth. I thought about the bond, which had been silent for 38 years, and which had known the moment I stood in that doorway. I thought about what Myra had said when she agreed, "All right," just those 2 words, as unhurried and unperformed as everything she did. Some things, I thought, take their time. Some things are not quick with words. She settled into Ashenvale the way she had settled into everything, without drama, without announcements, without asking for more than she needed. She kept the boundary stream. I had not suggested she stop tending it, and she had not suggested it either. We seemed to understand each other on this without speaking. She went in the mornings early, with the same quiet routine she had kept for 7 years. She came back smelling of river water and cold air and something green underneath, and that smell had become, in the space of a few weeks, the smell I looked for when I came through the hall door. The wolves followed her. This caused some disruption in the pack yard, because wolves that have attached to someone are not particularly interested in staying in the yard when the person they have attached to is on the other side of the hall. Corvin resolved this by the simple expedient of leaving the connecting gate unlatched, and now in the mornings the hall had wolves in it, which the hall women found varying degrees of inconvenient, and which I found entirely reasonable. The council settled. Breck settled first and quickest, because Breck is a man who respects evidence, and the evidence of the wolves was not easy to argue with. The others followed in their own time. One of them came to me privately to say that he had heard the story of Aldrich from one of my riders and found it meaningful, and I told him he was right to find it meaningful, and I left it there. The Eastern Lord said something about precedent, as expected. I sent them a formal reply on the matter, which Breck drafted and which I approved, and which pointed out that the Alpha King of Ashenvale's choice of mate was not a subject on which the Eastern Lords had standing, and that if they wished to discuss the border treaty, they could come to the hall in spring and we would discuss it over dinner like civilized people. They came to dinner. They met Myra. One of them, the oldest, looked at her for a long moment and then said, "You are the one who healed the wolf with the arrow wound." She said yes. He nodded slowly and said nothing further, but he was more agreeable about the border treaty than he had been in 3 years, and I considered this a satisfactory outcome. Myra herself moved through it all the way she moved through the stream work, with attention and steadiness and the particular quality of someone who does not need to make an impression because they are not performing anything. She listened to people. She remembered things they told her. She asked the hall women about their families, and she remembered the names, and she asked after the children by name the next time she saw them. These are not unusual qualities, and yet they seemed unusual here, in a hall that had been without a Luna for 11 years and that had forgotten, perhaps, what it felt like to have someone in it who was simply paying attention. I watched her and I was increasingly at peace. Not the peace of resignation, which I had been mistaking for peace for the better part of a decade. This was the other kind, the peace of arrival, of a thing resolved, of a name finally spoken that you did not know you had been waiting to hear. In the deep of the following winter, on a night when the snow was coming down steady and the hall fires were burned high, and the wolves were in their warm pile near the hearth, I found Myra at the window in the study, looking out at the stream. You could not see the stream from there. The willows and the dark and the snow made it invisible. But she was looking in its direction, and there was a quality to her face in the firelight that I had come to know. Not sadness, not longing exactly, but a quiet gratitude, the expression of someone accounting the distance between where they were and where they might have been. I came and stood beside her. She did not look at me, but she leaned slightly, the small shift of a person who has decided that leaning is allowed. "I was thinking of Torin," she said. "He would have found this very funny." "Why funny?" "He told me once that the stream was the best possible place to be." She looked at me sideways. "He meant it practically, the fish, the timber, the fertile ground. But I think he also meant something else. He said things happened at boundaries. He said the edge of a territory is where things find their way in." I thought about Nass arriving at a door one night with an arrow in her shoulder. I thought about Aldrich walking through the dark. I thought about myself on the boundary road, 11 years of silence and 38 years of a bond that didn't move, and one morning in a cottage that smelled of river water and herbs, and the sound of a key turning. "He was right," I said. Myra looked out at the invisible stream. The snow came down outside the window. The wolves breathed slowly by the fire. From somewhere in the hall, a door closed on warmth, and the sound of voices carried for a moment and then was quiet. She reached across and took my hand, the way I had taken hers in the frost grass on the morning the ice broke, without ceremony, without announcement, simply as if this were where her hand had always been. I held it, and I thought, Aldrich knew. He walked through 7 days of winter, and he lay down in the frost grass at the boundary of my kingdom, and he chose who was there with him at the end, and he was right. Some things know before you do. Some bonds are patient the way old wolves are patient, not slow, just certain, waiting for the moment that was always coming, the moment that the thaw ice meets the open water and everything that was held underneath is finally, fully free.